and then we'll just go through some motions so that you can kind of hear from your peers and think about what you might not have done with such. So I want to just start. Never hear me, Mike? I want to just start by saying that this may seem obvious, but when you first get a motion, take a minute to think about what the motion is asking you to debate, right? Very obvious point, but what I see, especially with people that have been debating a while, but maybe not years and years, is that they hear a motion and it triggers an idea that they already have. And then they get very caught up with the arguments with that idea, and then possibly go into the debate not really discussing the motion. Okay? Has that ever happened to any of you? So I see it happen even with my experienced debaters. They'll walk out of a round saying, yeah, we really did have the right motion. Because they get an idea from something in the topic, and then they just start thinking of arguments and kind of don't go back to the motion. So always just take a minute to think, what is the motion asking me, right? And another thing that I would say is very important is take a minute by yourself, not with your partner, right? Because I know that we work so well, with our partners, and we want to make sure that you're together thinking the same thing. But it's very possible that that can become a problem. Why might it be a problem if you just start talking together immediately? Well, so even though you want to be on the same page with your partner, right, this is a situation where groupthink might not be the best thing, right? Because you might start having a good idea, hear some ideas from your partner, and forget your own idea, and maybe not have the best strategy going into the debate, or maybe miss something really important. So I think it's always important to take a few minutes, both of you brainstorm separately, and then discuss what ideas do we have, are we thinking the same way. It also gives you an opportunity to recognize something that you maybe wouldn't have thought of, right? So you can identify then if there are different ways of seeing this motion and it's not maybe as obvious as what your first thought was. Does that make sense? So I know this sounds very basic and very obvious, but take some time by yourself first, then discuss it with your partner so that you know that you're having the best possible strategy as you approach a motion, right? So the first thing that you're going to want to think when you look at this motion is what are the underlying principles the motion is asking you to do. So I want to start just from the beginning, looking at some specific motions that are very tuna-esque. These are the types of motions that he will give you in the debate rounds and the tournaments. So the first one is, this house would ban companies from advertising their products in a sexualized manner. What does that mean, first? Please help me out this morning. It's way too early for me to just... What might this mean? Any ideas at all? Okay, so they shouldn't use sexual content to try to get people to buy things, right? Other ideas? What are some of the principles underlying this? Why might this be problematic? Can you say that again? Okay, so moral or ethical problems. Why might it be a moral or ethical problem? I'm sorry, I have a hard time hearing. Okay, so bad impact on children. What else? So what's the concept? What's the debate? Okay, good. So these are all, we're getting to arguments, but I want to kind of think what are the larger underlying principles. Let's take a minute and step back and think, do a quick stakeholder analysis, right? Do you know anyone? I heard the chocolate. Do you all know what I mean when I say stakeholders? Yes? Anybody not? Okay, so who are the stakeholders in this motion? Companies? Okay. Who else? Okay, the public. But is the public one same group? No. Okay, so what are maybe within the public who might be stakeholders? Children? Old people?
Yeah.
Okay. Who else? Women? Who else? Okay, men. So children and old people, women and men, is there anyone coming to me? Okay, so consumers? Okay, so religion, religious people. And so even in that, right, so really we have the individuals, right, but also like churches could have issue. Who else? Okay, government, definitely. Especially because who's going to do that? Okay, so yeah, the advertising companies. Okay, disabled people. Parents. Anyone else you can think of that would be important in this? Teenagers? Okay. So, okay, we'll make that separate from children. Anything else that you can think of that would be important? Okay, so like employees within the companies, is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, those who receive the video and show TV.
Oh, okay, so media, right? So all media channels, right, that are potentially promoting or making profit from. And I think along those lines you can investors, possibly, right? We have a soundtrack. Nice. Okay, so yes, within these, so when we talk about consumers, we have lots of subgroups, right? When we talk about the companies, we're talking about the people that run the companies, the people that maybe their jobs depend on the companies, people that are investing and have money in these companies, and then also the media, right? The government, of course, women and parents are kind of among the genders. I mean, obviously there's many subgroups, and these will cross over, for instance, you know, teenagers that are men, right? Parents and everything. So we see all of these possible stakeholders. Now I want you to think about what are some of the whys, right? The arguments for the different stakeholders. So let's just kind of go through them quickly and think, you know, both for government and for opposition. What are some arguments that companies as stakeholders might have on this topic? Why would companies maybe be against this ban? Okay, so that might be why a company is on the government side, right? What about opposition? Money, right? So, what about the government? Why might the government want to ban companies from advertising their products in a sexualized manner? Taxes. Explain. Taxes how?
When the government will say if you use the sexualized manner, then you will pay us more.
Okay, but is that a ban?
No.
Okay. So, possibly, and this is a very good example though, of when we talk about how we see a topic, and we have ideas maybe from a similar topic that we've seen, and then we forget. This happens all the time, right? So, a very similar topic might be this house would restrict companies, right? And then something like taxation would be a very important argument. But if we're actually banning companies from it, then it probably won't come up as much as debate or right? Why is this important for women? Okay, so currently at least, most of this type of advertising uses women more in a sexualized manner, right? It's not that it doesn't happen with men, but the large majority of it is with women, so it's potentially affecting them much, much more. How is it affecting them?
The women are used as products of those advertising products, and it's anti-tradition.
Okay, so now within women, we're talking specifically about maybe the models or the actors that are being used in this way, right? What other women might it affect? Ordinary women, what?
Because these models show bigger fashion, so they're usually slim, and some ordinary women might go on diets in order to exercise appearance and harm their health.
Okay, so good. So these are arguments specifically from this stakeholder point of women, right, on why you should ban this, because it's harmful to women in society. Sets up unrealistic expectations, maybe creates harmful habits or lifestyles, right? Bad for health, right? What else?
Women have children.
Okay.
They're about their children, and chooses to
Okay, so women as parents are concerned about the influence that it has on their children or teenagers, right? What else? What else might this be bad for women? Okay, for equality, right? The idea, people that want to push equal rights, then if you take one group and use them in this exploitative way, it can be bad for them, right? What about the other side of it? Are there any reasons why not banning this women would support it? How about not banning it, anyone would support? What are some arguments for not banning? Definitely the two sides.
maybe they will use some fuel sites which are very popular, so people will be like, wow, and
Okay, so you can make the argument that some people want that publicity or exposure regardless of how it happens, that's still good for them. Okay, what else? Why else might people say not banning is good, or you should ban it?
I guess some women would like to see some sexualized patterns on advertisements, or they don't actually want this, or they just think that us
evidence to sell things, and they should have that right, right? It's sort of also touching with the women that some women might think that's good for them and that should be their choice, right? Other thoughts on this topic? Why else might you not want to ban companies from sexualized content? Advertising their products in a sexualized manner. Can anyone give me a clear definition of what in a sexualized manner is?
To touch part of the body to attract consumers' eyes to introduce or to sell the product.
Okay, so exposing part of the body to attract someone to buy a product, right? So does that mean anytime that there's part of the body exposed, it would possibly fall into this type of advertising? No. So you said to attract. So the intent is something we are kind of assuming we can clearly define, right? So why might that be problematic to ban products in a sexualized manner? Why might it be a problem to do this?
Maybe because people like red flag. I mean, if they will see that something is bad, they'll be more interested to look at this and say, maybe it is something interesting if the government bans. So, for example, films that were watching something there or watching another film is more interesting than others, which are not fans.
Okay, so you touched on a couple different good arguments there. One is that it might push it underground and you get more of a demand in the black market for sexualized content, right? And then another one was that now we're kind of creating a moral judgment on sexuality, right, in advertising, and that could also be a problem, right? So some of the arguments that even some women, some feminists might make is that kind of choice takes over this statement that sexualized content is bad, right? Other thoughts?
Maybe this method is too powerful and it will attract the attention of the consumers like too much. Whatever product is, it will be bad or good, but this information will it's too powerful and it's not fair.
Okay. So are you saying kind of the advertising strategy is manipulative to the consumer? Is that what you're saying? Okay. So it possibly manipulates the consumer in a way that's not ethical, right? Okay. For society as a whole, is there any reason that we would want to ban this? What might be some of the outcomes that too much kind of sexualized products would do in a society? Okay, what does that mean though? The level of morality goes down, what happens? Like what? Okay, so people might change their actions in response to this because it's become somewhat normalized. And I don't know how familiar any of you are with sometimes advertising and sexual content, but some examples are sometimes useful, right? Because a lot of the advertisements that use sexual content are very questionable, right? Display things that border sexual assault, right? Definitely objectification, right? Definitely making women or the man seem like an object, right? So if that then transcends into the society, you can see a lot of problems too, right? So What are some underlying principles? What is the debate? What is the conflict? What is in conflict in this debate? And there's more than one possible debate here, but what are the main conflicts? We're talking about potentially like social problems, right? Responsibility of society versus what? Okay, so the profit of the companies, right? It's kind of like a societal good versus individual. If you know, call the companies like individuals, the rights of the individual companies, right, versus the good of society, right? So you're looking at this like as a broad debate, right? There's many different ways you can frame it. This actually has a few different conflicts that you can focus on, but you want to always consider what's the debate, right? Especially on a topic like this, it's very easy to see one side very easily and have difficulty with the other side. So I want to take just a minute to talk about, because what's the side that seems harder to debate here? So not, so allowing sexual lust, manner. But what's closer to the current state? Banning or not banning? Okay. Do you think that that's the same in all places? Or do you think that that varies by country? Do you think that most countries have a ban on sexualized advertising? No. Okay. So even though we might, when we look at this, think this is kind of the right side of things, it's not the most common that's going on. So there must be good arguments against it, right? So what are those good arguments against why banning would be a bad idea?
I think it will be hard to ban this advertising because what there is like not exactly the pollution of sexualized ban. So it will be very hard for the government to put the stage to what is sexualized ban.
Okay, good. So I want to talk just a minute on this one, and because our time got cut short a little bit, because I want to talk about the next one too. We have a few minutes. I want to talk just briefly about mechanism, okay? Because this is potentially a motion where it becomes important. When you have something like this house would ban, you're actually saying someone's going to do something. And as you know, there's different types of motions, right? So in this motion, would you have a model? No? Why?
It's hard to put this motion into action because it's hard for the government to set up exact criteria for the advertisements to say that whether they have too much sexualized and minor or not so much to buy. And also for some products such as customs, they have to include some sexualized and minor.
Okay. Does everyone agree that you would not have a model on this? Since it's have to have an opinion. Yes? No? So not all motions require a model. This is one where I would expect to usually see one though. Okay? Because you are saying you're going to do something. This just isn't saying this house believes that sexuality in advertising is bad for society, right? If it said that, then you probably would not have a model. The debate is whether or not, kind of on balance, it causes more harm than good, right? Or whether or not the company's rights are more important. But when it's asking that you would ban, it's policy, and you do want to have a model, okay? So that would then we get into what types of models, and when you talk about top teams, we'll do that in a lot more depth. But you're right, because this is honestly worded somewhat poorly, you probably don't want to get model, but you do want to explain it well enough where the differences aren't going to muddle the debate, right? So you might say something like, we're not talking about medical advertisements or advertisements for birth control or things like that. We're talking about when sexuality is used when it has nothing to do with it. And I think that would be a fair way to frame the debate. I don't think that anyone's going to require you to talk about things where the product is directly related to sexuality. That's not really what the debate's about, okay? But you probably do want a model. Does that mean that every time you go into a debate like this, the first government is going to provide one? No. But if I was the first government, I would definitely have a model saying, this is what we're doing, right? Okay. What's an example? So we'll just move, because we just have a few minutes left, to this second one, because I think this is a different type of motion. What kind of motion is this? Every citizen should be provided with internet access. If you were first government, how would you frame this debate? Okay, so you would frame it as a value?
We should equalize this as a human right.
Sure. So, depending, once again, I think these are intentionally worded to leave some openness, right? You have some options depending how you want to address this one, right? You definitely could frame it as a policy with a specific model, saying that we're going to provide internet access to every citizen. Or you could just talk about whether or not this is a basic right and why, and what the pros and cons of that are, and talk about it more like a value and just present the framework. So I think you have more flexibility in a motion like this than in a motion that says would ban. Does that make sense? So, we only have a few more minutes. Who are the primary stakeholders in this second motion? Just a couple. Citizens. Okay. What types of citizens might be most affected by this? Okay, so citizens that for either location or economic reasons don't have good internet access, right? They're going to be the group that is most interested in this, right? I think there's a lot of reasons why you would say this is a good thing. What might be some barriers or arguments against giving every citizen internet access? Okay, so that it's not a good place to put resources, right? That it's not a fundamental right. Other ideas? Okay, so for the government as a stakeholder, there might be reasons why this is not in their best interest, right? only have like 1 minute left, I want to just close with reminding you that as you're coming up with the arguments, after you've thought, what is this debate really about? As you're coming up with arguments for your side of the debate, also think, if I'm on the other side, what are the arguments that I will come up with, right? So that you can know what to expect to refute, right? So if you spend all of your time thinking, what are my good arguments, then you might be completely unprepared for the arguments that come on the other side. So always take some time and put yourself in the head of the other side to think, what are the good arguments on the other side? Because those should come up in the debate, okay? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so we're going to be doing exercises now in your individual groups, and of course you can ask your instructors in the exercise groups questions too, and then for all of you here for a few minutes after to also answer any questions that you have. And are we doing our, like, the way you usually does it is my exercise.